Okay, welcome back. I'm really curious to hear about this contribution because it comes from Microsoft, and historically DevOps has started as a Linux field. So let's welcome April Edwards, which is a senior software engineer and cloud advocate for Microsoft, specializing in data center modernization and application transformation, focusing, his focus is bringing their Microsoft clients to the cloud, and last but not least, is also an accomplished triathlete that competes in Ironman. So, April, the stage is yours, and then we'll be back for Q&A at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ivan. And I want to thank you to everyone for having me. So let's get started. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation. Today, we're going to talk about DevOps at Microsoft and how we transformed ourselves as an organization. And when I start every talk, I like to ask everyone, how do you define DevOps? And if I were to ask all of you, I would get very different answers from each and every one of you. And it's certainly kind of part of how we've, evolved our organizations, our experiences, and all that good stuff. So whenever we go into a DevOps discussion, it's really important that we define what is DevOps, okay? So at Microsoft, we use this definition. DevOps is the union of people, process, and technologies to enable continuous delivery of value to end users. This is something we use when we drive to our customers, when we talk to our customers. We want to deliver this value. Yes, we're trying to ship products. We're trying to do features. We're trying to do all these other things, but we want to deliver value. If we're not delivering value, we're not delivering DevOps. So why is DevOps important? Because your competition's already doing it. How many of you remember Blockbuster? You could go to a store, rent a VHS tape. Now we have Netflix. Another great example is Domino's. You can order a pizza and track your whole order from beginning to end, when you've made that order to when it gets delivered to your door. We know that DevOps is important because it increases velocity of our organizations, it reduces downtime, and it reduces human error. We know that 95% of the outages and security breaches in the cloud are due to human error, because we're infallible, aren't we? So we know that DevOps is no longer just a theory, but we have statistical fact to show how organizations achieve DevOps and what they get out of it. What are the benefits? We know that companies that are high-performing DevOps organizations, like your Ubers, like your Domino's, like your Netflixes, they do over 208 times more frequent deployments to their production environment. They have a faster time to market, and you can see that because the competition of these organizations have absolutely suffered. We know there's 106 times faster time commit to deploy. We know there's an increased revenue from these organizations, and they can recover from incidences over 2,600 times faster. So people always say, where do we start? Where do we begin? We always want to start where it hurts most and go from there. So let's talk about what we did at Microsoft. Microsoft transformed. This really began with the entry of Satya Nadella. Satya is a former engineer, and he said, we're going to eat our own dog food. And we're going to focus on three really important things. We're going to adopt a growth mindset. And this is something you hear a lot from Microsoft. We're not in a fixed frame mindset. We want to grow. We want to make things better for ourselves, not only how I operate as a developer, but how my customers are perceiving our product and how our products are working. We have a culture of customer obsession. We put the customers first. And this is very different from the Microsoft of old. And the perception has absolutely changed in the past few years. And most importantly, we align to shared objectives within our teams. So here's what we've done throughout our DevOps journey. We've changed our definition of done. We no longer ship a box product to you. We're developing our products in the cloud, using our own products and delivering that to our customers and getting that feedback. And we have a production-first mindset. So anything we deploy, we deliver, we're looking for it to go to production, not just a dev test environment, but actually what's going to be delivered to you as a consumer. We have changed how we collaborate, how we develop, and how we deliver. And I'm going to touch on this. I'm going to talk about how we've structured our teams within Microsoft to embrace DevOps in our culture and our organization. The other thing we've done, we've enhanced security from development to production. And as a developer, you don't want to hear about security, but you've been in any project, you can know, yes, how is this secure? It's in the cloud. How do we get security into our products? So starting from day one, we've put that security in our products from our developer mindset. So we talk about DevOps, right? And we've defined that. We also have the tool Azure DevOps. We use this product internally every day. I'm in a team that builds with customers around the globe. So we're delivering not only DevOps processes, but also using our tool, Azure DevOps. We deliver so many of our products off Azure DevOps, Windows, Xbox, all these major projects, Microsoft 365. We do over 85,000 deployments per day on Azure DevOps. We have over 5 million work items, and we update over 500,000 work items every single day. We do over 4.5 million builds per month using Azure DevOps. So let's talk about where we began with. How many of you have used Team Foundation Server 2005? How many of you remember that? Or even 2015? It wasn't the greatest product. We started building TFS 2005, and it actually took 3 years to write this product. It took 18 months of development and another 18 months of fixing it to get it to ship. We were shipping a box product at Microsoft. It took so long to ship TFS 2005 that it actually didn't ship till I think it was February 2006. That's quite a bit of time. So we had a 3-year delivery cycle when we had TFS 2015, and we knew we had to do better. We moved that 3-year kind of release cycle to almost a 1-year cycle. And we've progressed through the years from, 2005 all the way up to TFS 2015. And we had different updates that kind of came through as well. And then we started changing our mindset. We needed to find a better way to deliver this product to our customers. So for those of you that remember the name change of Team Foundation Server to Azure DevOps, we built Azure DevOps as a cloud-first product. It's hosted in the cloud, and we started consuming it. And we started taking that 3-year cycle down to 3 months. How did we get the 3-month cycle? We made a lot of changes internally, but we had to find what we call our Goldilocks principle. We had to take our box product, deliver it in the cloud, and DevOps it. We had to DevOps our DevOps product, right? So we played around with our sprint cycles first and foremost. We started off with month-long sprint cycles, and we just weren't getting the productivity we needed out of our product. Then we also went to a 2-week sprint cycle, which is really common, quite, really tight timeframes, but that was too short of a sprint cycle. So we found this Goldilocks piece, i.e. that perfect place for our sprint cycles of 3 weeks. And in every organization I talk to, you have to find your Goldilocks. It may be 2 weeks, it may be 4 weeks, but it's how we develop faster and able to deploy that out. So if you're using Azure DevOps today, you'll absolutely recognize new features coming out in about every 3 months. So how did we kind of get to this place? How did we start doing this as Microsoft? And this is a really great journey because a lot of times people don't think of Microsoft as being an open source friendly community. But one of the things we really did is we changed our definition of done. What does done look like? Yes, we shipped a product in 3 years, but that's what we call done, but it wasn't great and we know it. So we've enabled live feedback on all of our products. If you log into GitHub, you can give feedback on the products today, and that's fantastic. You can open up issues, you can give that feedback, and we will take that on board. All that feedback is brought into our engineering team, and they're the first ones that see it. Not a corporate vice president or anyone else in the food chain, the engineers, the people working on the product, see your feedback and can work with you on it. We also collect a lot of telemetry data on our products. So when we talk about DevOps and we talk about the process of DevOps, it begins to not only how we just build and deploy code, but how we take that feedback cycle in. And that's really important. We can make incremental changes to our product, and every 3 weeks, we make those changes. And honestly, we've really focused on having a customer-first strategy. We are completely open to listening to our customers and getting that feedback, and that's really important. We use all sorts of forms like GitHub, which most of you might be familiar with, but we have bridged that gap between the engineers and the customers. Microsoft of old used to call up and get help on a support ticket. You knew you weren't speaking to someone in your own country, and gosh knows what time zone they were in, and that was really tough. So by opening up forums and being more social and opening that up for our products, we've enabled our customers to come in and give us feedback. And that's really important for organizations as well, not just Microsoft, because we're not just delivering a product to customers, we have to almost become a software company in and of ourselves. We also get a lot of customer engagement, but we have to have empathy for what our customers are going through. And that's been really key. We don't always understand what the customer end user wants to achieve. So that's going back to that value conversation. So we keep metrics and we have people that maintain that relationship with customers and are that front facing so we can get that feedback in. One of the biggest and probably hardest thing to change in an organization when you're looking to embrace DevOps and to reorg it a little bit is eliminating those unhelpful KPIs. How many of you as developers have been measured against how many lines of code you have to deliver? Or maybe you had a timeline and you're really pushing your code out and you're rushing it to get to that timeline. Maybe you have, as a team, numbers you have to hit and whatever your team velocity is, or maybe you have to resolve X amount of bugs in your product. That puts a lot of pressure on the teams, and that forces us as humans to make that error. So we took away those KPIs from our engineers within Microsoft, and we changed what we tracked within our organizations. So I'm personally measured on, is the customer happy and how much impact did I have? And that's really, really hard to measure. We do have metrics against that, but we've changed that from saying, this is how many lines of code I've delivered in this project or this sprint cycle. I now can say, this is what value I've delivered to the customer, and we pull some metrics off of it. So some things we can look at are, what are impactful KPIs? What things can we look at with what our customers are doing? Are they using our product? Are we delivering that value? Is there satisfaction scores we can look at? What's the customer engagement on this? And by opening up that feedback loop, we get more feedback and hopefully it's positive, but we take the negative as well and try to make it better for those next sprint cycles. And how effective is our DevOps process? DevOps never stops. When we talk to customers, we want to fail fast. If a product or feature doesn't work, and we've deployed it, we need to make that better and know immediately before making that into a box product that ships, and then you're stuck with it. So that's why we want to fail fast. We need time to build it. We need time to test everything, and we need time to improve it, especially in our process. And we need to be able to quickly detect and fix issues, because I think the reality is something's going to go wrong. How many times have you used a product, Microsoft or otherwise, you've been using it and something breaks? You want immediate resolution, especially when you're working in the cloud. That time to resolution is absolutely critical. So having really good metrics that we can work against are great indicators. And these high-performing DevOps organizations have these metrics at hand. And it's something we have at Microsoft. And we use various different methods to do that. And I'll go into that in just a second. It's really important to have a product-centric mindset. So I talked about how we've done it. I've talked a little bit how we've changed this box product, but how do we make the people change? Because the people and the culture change is the hardest thing to do in an organization. So we took our teams and we're focused around a product. We had very siloed teams, and most organizations do. Their developers, their operations, their QA, their testers, their security teams all sit in these silos. And that's been the traditional way of doing it, but is it the most effective? We really need to break down these teams and deploy them into feature teams. So there's product ownership and owning that feature. As you can say, right, I'm working in a team, I'm working on this aspect of of this project. I don't care about that other piece of it. That's someone else's problem. Taking that off of handing that and throwing things over the fence is one of the most important things that we did here at Microsoft. We changed our teams into feature teams. So we took away this label that we had in our teams of, I'm a QA, I'm a tester, and we asked everyone to be engineers. So we were, and like most organizations, a horizontal organization. So you owned part of an application stack, and that's what you did. When you own that part of the application stack, you don't have empathy for the other parts, and you don't understand those other contingencies and other dependencies in that application. So at Microsoft, we strive for vertical. This means that we own an entire feature and application stack together as a team. So in my current team, I have people that have, different backgrounds in their team. I work in a lot of cloud native, application transformation, a lot of DevOps, infrastructure as code. I have a lot of guys on my team that might focus on data or AI and ML, but we work together and we become full stack engineers together. We're not just testers, we're not just coders. And this is hard. This could be hard transformation in your organization, but it starts from the top down. It gets that executive buy-in. But what we find in these organizations is that engineers are leading the way in innovation. And Satya Nadella has recently used the phrase developer velocity. What's your developer velocity in the organization? Are you enabling your developers? Are you encouraging that with trust? And what are you building and deploying? And this plays into the whole DevOps conversation. And he's been the driver at Microsoft from the top down. So we had to evolve our teams. So how do we do this? Now, take this with a grain of salt. This was pre-COVID, but we've adapted a little bit, right? So pre-COVID, we had physical team rooms that our team sat in. So we did have some remote workers, but our teams are grouped together via geography. And they sat in the same room together, and they were cross-discipline engineers. We brought in these cross-disciplines and built our teams. I had previously worked on a team that was all cloud native and a great group of people to work with, but we all specialized in one area. So if something came up with a data question or something outside of our remit, that wasn't our remit. We had to pull in someone else. So instead of working in that kind of specialized focus, I was moving to a team with people different, skill sets. So we have a very high cross-discipline team now. And the way our teams are structured is we have one engineering lead and one product owner. The product owner sees that vision for the project. They help own that, 18 months or maybe 2 years, but usually 18 months of what this project is going to do. And then we have an engineering lead that helps lead it. But then we're all engineers. We're 10 to 12 engineers on the team with different backgrounds and different skill sets to be those full stack developers. And we're very much self-managing as a team. And what that means is we develop our own team mantra. What works for our team? What's our kind of team working code of conduct? But we own the project itself. So while the project's 18-month cycle and what we're trying to achieve and what our definition done in is done by a product owner, the engineers own the process. We own that. So we decide what works for us and we develop the sprint cycles. We develop our own epics. So we own that. We know what's going to be delivered and we can get that done in the right time. We have very clear, again, charter and goals based on, our OKRs, what we're trying to deliver, what value we're trying to deliver to the organization, what features we're delivering. And this team will stay intact for about 12 to 18 months. And in the engineering teams, about every 12 to 18 months, you're given the opportunity to go to another team, maybe find a better fit or maybe try a new feature, something else you want to work on. And we find that about 80% of people in those teams want to stay because they really enjoy the team they're working on. They've really found their niche, and that's awesome. So they own all the features that are going to production. This isn't handed off to anyone else, not the product owner. It's owned completely to the features in production. And that's really important. When you take ownership of something, there's a lot more pride in it, in what you're getting from it and what you're going to put into it. So we've really evolved our engineering teams to full stack developers, that we handle everything kind of from beginning to end of the DevOps process. We make it better. We help with feature development. We help with, our design, and we're a very agile organization. So we help with production support and we help with our pipelines. We, do everything from the design to the delivery that's going into production. And I think it's pretty good to say Microsoft has been really transparent about things because outages are going to happen. And unfortunately, capacity gets reached. It is hardware. We do deliver against SLAs, but we expose live site incidences to our customers. If you're playing Xbox and there's an outage and you want to know about it, we have a website that shows it to you. We have it for Azure as well. We have it for M365. We have it for Azure DevOps. We have it for all of our products. We have to keep ways to keep our customers informed because outages are going to happen, but it's how you respond. So we need to be able to measure this and improve upon it. So we have metrics to know how many incidences we had per month, maybe per customer if we need to break it down that way, if you have customers with different SLAs. But we also measure our time to detection and our time to mitigation, and those are critical for us. So while we've, changed our engineering teams and how we do it better, we look at this DevOps process and go, right, we need to make changes here because maybe this is something that's hurting us the most right now as an organization. We need to identify patterns. So how do we do this? When we have a product-centric mindset, we have all this kind of monitoring and enablement in the cloud. We can get that feedback from, whether it's in kind of a Power BI dashboard or we're using Azure and a lot of the tools built in. So Microsoft has changed how they collaborated, develop, and how they deliver their products. So how do we help the developers? Collaboration on code is super critical. How do you collaborate? There are so many tools out there today that allow you to collaborate. And, it's things like using your README to kind of talk about your project intent, keeping your code clean, commented on, and approachable. These are really good developer practices to have. And you can use tools like GitHub or Azure repos. And something we did at Microsoft to help us deliver these features in these 3-week cycles is we changed our testing. We were running functional tests before, and functional tests take quite a bit of time to run. So we stopped doing functional tests as much and run unit tests. And we run more unit tests and more unit tests. We run over 50,000 unit tests before a feature goes live. And we go by the saying, green means green, red means red. You cannot push your changes to a main branch in your pipeline. And we can't deploy it to production until it passes all of those 50,000 tests in our code. We keep our customers informed, but we live by the unit test in our code. We must have that 100% pass rate to proceed. So only the all green builds get pushed to release. If it's not an all green build, we pull it back, we work on it, or it gets thrown out depending on the feature capability. But we run pre-prod tests on every single continuous integration build. And then how do we expose our new releases? We use something called feature flags in Azure DevOps, which is a fantastic tool because we can progressively show what feature is available. And the way we do this at Microsoft is that we deploy to some canary users, and these might be some internal users within the organization. Then it might go out to the engineers at Microsoft and maybe some VIPs in your organization. So we test it, we give feedback on the product straight to the engineering teams internally as well, because I don't necessarily develop on some of these products, but I can give that feedback directly and open up an issue. And then we deploy maybe to the wider Microsoft or maybe to a region. And if we roll out a feature to a region, maybe, half the end users are struggling with the feature. We can turn off the feature flag and roll those changes back immediately without having to change our code. So we can really deploy our features out in rings, if you will, starting from a small part of our organization to the wider end user, which would be like yourselves for Azure DevOps. And another critical thing that we did at Microsoft that I spoke about is that we built security practices into our delivery from day one. So from the moment we are, writing our code on our machines or in the environment we're working in, that is a secure environment. We're using things like VS Code as our IDE. Where are codes sitting? What repository? Are we using Azure repos or are we using something like GitHub? And then every time we commit our code, we build in security practices into those commits. We run our build and we run all of our tests in there, all of our unit tests, and then we deploy it. We can analyze it, and then we have some operational control at the end of it. This is really enveloping the full DevOps process from the build, the test, the plan, all the way to commit, and then having operational feedback, allowing us to make changes for that next sprint cycle and knowing how we can improve each and every cycle of our product. So we talk about developer tools. Developer enablement is absolutely critical. I personally love VS Code. I love it because it helps me highlight syntax and integrates into Azure and into my GitHub account. So I can test things locally. I can push them up and test them into our build pipeline. And it's a really, really seamless tool. We also have something called VS Code Spaces, which allow your developers to develop in the cloud and not necessarily locally on your machine. And with everyone working remotely right now, it saved compute capacity on machines, but you can configure that environment as you need to as an organization. It's secured and ready to go. And then shared amongst your developers. So everyone's testing in that same environment on VS Code. So I've talked about how we've done this at Microsoft. Let's talk about Azure DevOps, the product. Okay. This is a great product. And, people say, well, I'm a Java developer. I'm deploying to AWS. That's okay. Azure DevOps allows you to develop for any language and any platform. Any language, seriously, any language, whether you're, .NET developer, you're coding in Go or Java or C#, whatever it is, we can fully support that language and you can develop to any platform. We have so many customers that are in this hybrid model, not only deploying to Azure, but even on premises or maybe AWS and GCP. So you can absolutely do that with Azure DevOps. And we use 5 components within Azure DevOps, which is really critical to the platform. The first one is Azure Boards. So I talked to you about, being able to put bugs in, have some monitoring, and this is great for project management, having a full kind of overview of what the platform is going to do, of what you're delivering as a team. So there's full visibility and it's Kanban style. So it's super easy to read and you can customize it to your liking. Next is our CI/CD delivery. So our continuous integration, continuous delivery platform is Azure Pipelines, okay? And we deploy things through these pipelines, and that's where we do our build, our testing, and we deploy out. Now, we also have Azure repos, and this is pretty much a private Git repository that sits in your Azure tenant. So a lot of customers use this when there's kind of maybe some data residency questions about where their data is sitting. It's in their Azure tenant, uses their Active Directory, their normal login on the backbone to authenticate through. So that security side is through and through where they need to be. We also have Azure test plans, which allow you to kind of test and ship your code with confidence and get full reporting on your testing. And then we have our Azure Artifacts, which is kind of the package manager in Azure DevOps. And, you can, that supports NPM and Maven, and you can do custom artifacts as well. So when we do agile planning, I talked about agile boards, Azure DevOps boards. This is how we became a much more agile organization, we started using our own product. And when I'm delivering a product, a customer project, we're using Azure boards to manage everything from beginning to end in our project lifecycle. So we have end-to-end traceability. We can open up bugs. That links to our teams. So if we have an outage, we can put a notification Teams. Every time we open up a PR, I get a notification in Teams that a PR has been opened, and I'm ready for my reviewers. We have insights and tracking. So we can pull these insights out of Azure boards and track that from beginning to end of that project life cycle, but also what we're delivering. So we can get those KPIs as developers and not have to count lines of code and all these useless metrics that would put so much pressure on us as developers. And it's very much Scrum ready. And a lot of organizations work in Scrum or want to be working in Scrum. And when we're delivering on customer projects, this is Scrum ready for us. So we run our retros from here. We're able to do all our plans and everything else from Azure boards. So let's talk about Azure pipelines. Now, this is great because this is our CI/CD tooling. And really any language, any platform, any cloud. And it's fully extensible. We have extensions built in for so many third-party products that are in there that you can literally just look up in the marketplace and pull them in. It supports things like containers and Kubernetes. And this next one's going to be a bit of a funny one for everyone to hear, because if you haven't been involved in Microsoft and kind of, thinking we're Microsoft, we're not open source, best in class for open source. And you're thinking, oh, no way. Absolutely. So how do we do this? We integrate with these third-party tools. So we made an acquisition with GitHub. So we have a lot of customers that already have their source code sitting in GitHub today. So they can pull this into Azure pipelines. You don't have to move your source code repository. You don't have to change. This hooks straight into Azure pipelines and running your code. And GitHub's also another important tool because so many people use it, because we know that 80% of organizations are using open source technologies. So we have built in a ton of security features into GitHub as well. So we can scan for secrets in private and public repositories. We can look for issues in your code. We can also help read your code and help you deploy it. And you can use things like GitHub Actions. So the question is going to be GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. My advice to you is, if your code's already sitting in GitHub, start having to play with GitHub Actions. It's not just CI/CD, but full automation as well. And it's a great starting point. If your code is already sitting in Azure DevOps or you're using Team Foundation Server, it's a great tool. GitHub and GitHub Actions do not have all the great feature-rich capability that Azure DevOps does. So that's a little bit of a difference. GitHub. Things like Azure boards just aren't available in GitHub. So for that full product end-to-end lifecycle, Azure boards is absolutely critical and will be kind of more that Azure DevOps remit. So it's been an awesome transformation at Microsoft, and being part of it has been really great. To be able to deliver to customers has been really eye-opening, because we make improvements on every single project and every single feature we deploy to our customers, and being able to give that feedback. So remember, if you want to have a look on GitHub at any issues that are potentially posted, you can give that feedback, speak to those engineering teams, and open that issue. So how do you get started? Where do you go from here? There's some great resources for free at Microsoft. One of the best things I can tell you to go to is Microsoft Learn. It's learn.microsoft.com. We have free courses for you to take part in, some great learnings. Even if you just want to know something a little bit more on a product or a project, some kind of technology, start there. We also have Channel 9, where we have the Azure DevOps Lab. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at Twitter. I'm at the April Edwards or LinkedIn. So I just want to thank everyone for joining today, and I want to open it up for some questions.
Okay, there are questions, definitely. First one. Oh, by the way, very interesting.
Sorry, I'm having one little sound issue.
Okay. Not,
right.
Are you hearing now?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you now. Sorry, my sound cut out.
Okay. So, very interesting, and there are definitely questions. So, first one, actually asked by a couple of people. I'm curious to know about how much, or if any, resistance was to this kind of U-turn in delivery culture internally, and how that was managed.
Whenever there is change, and I will say this again, managing people is the hardest thing. It is absolutely the hardest thing. And whenever there's change in an organization, you will get people that leave. I don't have the statistics. I would say overall as an organization, Microsoft had a really good adoption rate, because it was the way it was approached. So we had the executive buy-in, which is really critical. And it was the change in how the managers operated as well and how the teams were constructed. It is hard to go to someone who's maybe a QA engineer or a tester and say, hey, you're now going to become an engineer and know about the full stack. That's a tough conversation to have. I think as the world's moved to cloud as well, you're no longer just a networking person, a storage person, or just, kind of this one trick pony. You have to kind of expand your skill sets to work in the cloud because there's so many integrations and dependencies. So as an organization, it was tough. It absolutely was tough. It wasn't overnight. It took some time, but overall there was a really good uptake to that. Microsoft likes changing everything on us every 12 to 18 months anyways. So there's always kind of, updates in our teams. And I kind of talked about, I was moved to a new team. Was it difficult? I had to be open to it. I had to have a growth mindset as well. And so did the organization. And I actually give feedback to my manager in how I'm doing in my team. Maybe what we're delivering, is this project delivery the right project for me to be on? So there's a very much an open culture at Microsoft. So it started with the managers kind of trickling down. And that's why we give engineers the opportunity every 12 to 18 months to say, hey, would you like to move team? Maybe a different feature, or there's a different, area of expertise you want to work on. Because of COVID, we're obviously all remote working now, which is are really focused on the people right now. And that's critical. So even though we've had a kind of like a restructure and move some teams around for the betterment, we've really focused on the people side of it. So we kind of had to take a step back from coding and say, let's focus on our people. What do our people need? And I think these are very interesting times as well to add on top of, let's embrace DevOps into our culture. But it's also a great time to do it because there's been so much change in the world, and the companies that will survive this are the ones that can adapt and take on these things.
Okay. There are a couple of curiosities too. Do you also manage operations for the features that you deliver? That's one of the questions.
Can you say that again?
Do you also manage the operations for the feature that the team deliver? I mean, so the team owns both development and operation for a feature?
Yes, correct. So in my team, we're developing on Azure and delivering on Azure for a customer product. But yes, the teams that are managing things like, let's say, so Azure DevOps, the product, because that's what we spoke about mostly. Yes, they're responsible for the operational side. So they hook in monitoring to the product. Now, this is mostly hosted in Azure. So the physical data centers are not managed by the teams. There are product teams that manage the product. So for instance, let's say I'm deploying a feature and I'm using an Azure web app, or maybe, Azure Kubernetes. If there's an actual limitation in the product, I then open up a bug to the team that works for AKS or Azure Web Apps if there's an actual limitation in the product for how I'm trying to deliver my feature. So I manage the day-to-day operation, the monitoring, and we still own that because that's part of our feature, how it performs, because we get those metrics on, when we deploy to production, is this performing as it needs to be? So if there's a physical hardware issue, that's a data center team within Microsoft. But if it's if there's a performance issue in our code that we built, we then look at the products behind it. Yes. But yeah, it is the operations, but it's a little bit trickier when you're in the cloud because we're not going to a SAN anymore and saying, oh, we're having storage issues and a disk failed. Someone's managing that. And because we're using the cloud, that is, we have taken off that operational burden because we're not sitting there swapping disks or plugging in cables anymore. We can literally migrate our storage or have resiliency in the back end that we're developing on as well. So that's another key feature.
Okay, there are also more questions popping in from the chat just right now. So, do you need to relate your sprints with management plans?
So no, we don't. There is a check-in to the product owner to kind of say, this is how we're going, and this is how things are progressing. But so there's a check-in, but management doesn't own it. So there is an update. We do also demo what we've developed and what we've delivered in that time. And to be honest, I'm in the middle of a project right now where we had to move our timelines because there's a component that we have to address in our cycles. And we absolutely are, because we've had some technical blockers. And that's okay. We've set the expectation. We've been transparent to the customer, and we've been transparent to management as to why. So again, we're looking to develop quality over quantity. And and we are delivering to a customer right now. So we want to make them happy. So if you look at the roadmap for Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions, when you look at the roadmap for our products, we give 2020 Q3, 2020 Q4. And people always ask, when's this going to be out? And we give a quarter because, again, we're working these 3-week cycles. We may have to push 3 weeks or we may have to push 6 weeks in our development cycles because, things like when COVID happened, we had to push a lot of our timelines, unfortunately. But I think the reality is for customer demand. And if there's customer demand in one area, if a feature is maybe not as in demand, it doesn't get pushed as soon. So that's why we give these kind of quarter dates, because that's where we're aiming to get it. So we, I don't want to say we build ourselves buffer, but we're not committing to a date like, November 30th, 2020. We say Q4, and it will come out within Q4.
Okay, questions again. How did you keep full stack teams to be standardized and not reinvent the wheel or process and tools?
So I think these teams, we were given a bit of direction. So again, we're told to eat our own dog food. So we use Azure DevOps to deliver our projects and our products to our customers and our end users. As a team, we get to choose some things. So there are technical decisions we have to make within a team for the feature or the product. So we are developing on Azure, and we're developing this feature. And there are some kind of, I don't want to say preset boundaries, but some technology agreements we have to stick to. When I'm delivering to a customer project in my team, that may change. When we talk about the definition of done, we are looking to say, what are we looking to achieve? What are we looking to deliver? The path in which we get there is what we own as engineers. And that's really critical. So we may, really want to use a certain technology because it looks really cool and it does tick all the boxes for the customer. But the reality is maybe there's some technical issues or limitations in the feature, in the products that we're trying to use. So we then have to say, we need to get this out in a different way. So there are, we always try to use, we mostly work in Azure in my team. And then, when we're developing our features, we're taking that feedback from people in the community. So that's really important. So that's how we prioritize what we deploy and how we get it out the door.
Okay. More, defined question. How can you have your definition of done for a story related to user feedback? Is that available only later?
So I think we have an 18-month roadmap for a product, okay? And that is owned by the product owner. We know where we want to go with it. Adding features in, we generate quite a bit of feedback. Sometimes features are developed and we get that feedback in with every 6 months, and we look at the amount of effort or the I guess really the feedback and to get that deployed, right? So we need to see what the appetite is, because as a customer, you can say, I really need this feature. The problem is, well, the 10 other customers that, or the hundreds of thousands of other customers also need that feature. So it is absolutely hard to pick and choose. But, sometimes we have some easy to deploy features, easy to enable features, and some that are a little bit more. So the higher, I guess, the epics, right, are what we outlined in our kind of 18-month cycle. And then our stories get adapted to our epics. So it is quite a bit of a, we have to adapt quite often. So very often you might see a feature and it's not on the roadmap. It's listed in development, but there's no time scale to it because of maybe some limitations or priority as well. Okay,
a question from the organization team from Fullo. How much deep you define your OKRs, project, teams, or personal level?
So we are measured in different ways. So we have a project kind of OKRs. So when we're deploying this product, what is the usability? What value is that delivering? So there's the product level kind of OKRs. And then there's team OKRs. As a team, how are we deploying against that? And that's part of the DevOps process and part of that culture change as well. How are we doing as a team? Do we need to, take a step back and work on something else as a team? Or how are we working together? How are our processes working? And there's constant change in this process. I mean, we might run a couple sprints and find, there's something else we need to change to deliver this better, maybe to deliver it faster. So each sprint cycle, we're constantly picking something as a team to help deliver better. And then I have personal OKRs as well. And my personal OKRs is the customer happy, and am I delivering impact? And impact is really hard, but what is the impact? I mean, there are some, and a lot of that's from monitoring and reporting. So from each of those levels, we use different types of reporting to achieve that. And it is hard to say, impact is just such a tough thing to measure. So there isn't quite always a number, but it can be from feedback from my colleagues, how I'm doing as an engineer, and how I'm delivering that, and being basically a better engineer myself.
Okay, now a curiosity from myself, actually. In your opinion, how much important has been the decision of building Azure in triggering this massive transformation at Microsoft? Do you think it would have happened anyway, even without the decision to build a massive public cloud?
I think it came from the decision of us eating our own dog food. So that was Satya coming in saying, look, we've built these products, people like them, but they need to be better. And some people didn't like them. I think the reality is we've built some products that weren't amazing. So we need to use them and understand them better. I think that, DevOps started before cloud, if you will. And it accelerated with the adoption of cloud. And a lot of customers find we're moving to the cloud. This is the time to embrace DevOps. And I've had feedback from some customers and even friends that they're like, we're on premise, we can't use DevOps. I'm like, you absolutely can. I think the cloud has accelerated it without question, because there's so many things you can do with leverage that are built in. There's so many features built into a lot of the products in cloud that you can enable. And I think, one thing of frustration, I remember when Office 365 came out, and it's a hosted service, and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to move my Exchange off premise, and I want my email, I want control over my email. And then people were talking about, oh, they're making lots of changes to it. But now we've gotten used to this fast change in pace in our environment. So because we're delivering faster and more agile software, our consumers are able to adapt to that as well. And we can get that feedback and make the products better. So I think, yes, us coming in and using our own products allows better feedback and better consumption. Whenever I work on a customer project, part of my job is I'm told to build, share, and learn. So when I'm learning, sharing, I'm constantly putting in bugs and getting those fed in, because unless people like yourselves or even the engineers are out deploying, like, we don't know where the problems are until you're doing it, because in the real world, things break and things don't always work as they should.
Okay. Thank you very much. It has been really, really interesting. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.